Bay doors are open. Welcome once again. Thank you for listening. I am Doug Heller, your host, film critic and historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. Here as always with my good friend and fellow kaiju spotter, Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for Armchair Cinema, Armchair Oscars, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com. Jerry, how are you doing?
You're horrible. I barely escaped the atomic bomb in Nagasaki, and now this? Too soon?
Yes. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are visiting the granddaddy of all giant monster movies.
We're stomping
Godzilla.
on Tokyo today.
Yes. Ishiro Honda's 1954 classic that started all of it.
Depending on which one you watch.
Well,
because the film we're talking about is Gojira.
The 1954 Japanese language without Raymond Burr.
Mm-hmm. That's Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Yes, this is the good one. This is not the English recut sticking Raymond Burr where he doesn't belong, which is
right.
Honestly most places. Co-written and directed by Ishiro Honda, man who basically directed probably about 2/3 of all the kaiju movies from the 50s through the 70s.
And boy, is it an evolution.
Yes. He started with this, and his next one was 2 years later was Rodan. He also did The Mysterians. He did Mothra. He did King Kong versus Godzilla, Mothra versus Godzilla.
Could you in Japan with Godzilla and Rodan?
He did Varan. He did War of the Gargantuans, Frankenstein versus Baragon. Yes, that's real.
Yeah, that's a thing.
King Kong Escapes. He did King Kong Escapes. I've seen that recently. The Japanese version does not exist in the West. It is awful.
Most King Kong movies are bad.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one when we talk about King Kong at the end of the month.
Yeah.
This, from an original story by Shigeru Kayama. I've actually read the short story adaptations of this and Godzilla Raids Again.
I love
actually
that title.
Pretty good.
If you go through the 60s and 70s, there's a lot of rides again. You know, the Magnificent Seven rode again. The Apple Dumpling Gang rode again. Who else? Godzilla rode again. There's a lot of rides again.
Godzilla raided again. That's a little different.
Yeah, but sometimes they made him the good guy.
Yeah, in the Showa era ones that went from 54 to 75, they made him more of the hero. In the Heisei era that started with Return of Godzilla in 1984, and then did like versus Biollante and versus King Ghidorah versus Mothra.
In the Millenniums.
Oh yeah. Well, there was also Godzilla versus Space Godzilla in the Heisei era, and that was better than it should have been. With Space Godzilla. But anyway, this one doesn't have any other monsters. He doesn't fight anybody except Japan.
Who's the real monster here? It turns out it was man.
It turns out it was us all along. So the staging of this is really pretty brilliant.
Can I give you kind of a... that's right, because I've only seen this twice. And you're the insider. I'm the outsider.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm more of a Mothra guy as far as these movies go. I'm not big on Godzilla, and I kind of got soured by it. By the recent Godzilla films, generally, who can love the Roland Emmerich? And I remember going to see Godzilla.
The best thing about the Roland Emmerich one is that not only does Godzilla fight and defeat him in Godzilla Final Wars from 2004, but there's a joke about it that talks about it. They say that there was a Godzilla in New York in the late 90s, but a lot of people don't think that was really one of them.
Yeah.
Like denying that it was even a Godzilla in the first, that it was a kaiju, but it wasn't Godzilla.
It wasn't our boy. But
yeah.
I remember I watched a couple of Godzilla movies in the lead up to the 2014, the one with Bryan Cranston, which I found wildly underwhelming. I was just not. I just wasn't in that. What was the Mutos? And I went to see that on opening day, and I just was not in it. And I've seen some of the subsequent Godzilla movies, and then I saw what might be my favorite monster movie of the modern era, and that was Kong Skull Island. That movie was fantastic.
That's a really good one. That's a really good one.
It's bloody and it's violent, and I love it.
Yeah.
And it's got Sam Jackson.
The only other one that I think I would contest would probably be Peter Jackson's King Kong from 2005.
After you've seen Skull Island, that one seems a little routine. The problem with the new one.
I actually just watched it a few days ago. The 3-hour and 20-minute cut. Oh no, it does not pale.
The problem with the new one, the problem with the Peter Jackson movie is, and this is going to sound weird, he looks too much like a gorilla. The great thing about King Kong, the original 1933, is you could see the work. You could see the work that was done. It just, I don't know, I never got involved in that Peter Jackson King Kong. Because I'm thinking, I've seen this done.
I fell in love with it.
I felt like I've seen this done as well as it could be done. And I was like, I didn't need it. And
I fell in love with it. It's probably the best unnecessary remake ever made.
Possibly, because I've seen a bunch of bad ones. But as far as this goes, I saw this for the first time when I saw this for the first time when the 2014 Godzilla was coming out, and I sat down and watched it. It was not what I expected, and
no,
you're expecting a $5 production budget. You're expecting herky-jerky special effects, which it does have. But what I did not expect.
But we can talk about the special effects.
What I did not expect was the pathos and the emotional drama, because you tend to forget this is 9 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you realize when they're walking through the ruins, those are real. Those are some real. Those look like some real places. I mean,
and when you see at the end when he's in Tokyo, seeing Tokyo, literally they say it's a sea of fire. Before World War II, the concept of Tokyo on fire was inconceivable.
The concept of any city on fire.
Any city being But then after, the fire campaign of Dresden, the bombing campaign of Tokyo, and then the 2 nuclear bombs, they didn't think that they would have ever seen anything like that. And then seeing it on screen,
and the fact that an entire city could be destroyed by one bomb.
Yeah.
This whole idea, because we had basically bombed Tokyo night after night after night after night, day after day after day.
It was punishing. And
the Japanese just would not give up, because the Japanese did not surrender. And then this happened, and it was like 5 days after Nagasaki. They surrendered. World War II was over.
Because they knew that if they didn't, another one was going to get dropped. And they were going to lose a whole other city.
Right.
It's crazy to think one of our best presidents is also one of the largest mass murderers in the history of the world.
Right. And it's also interesting to think that as you look at the actors in this film, you realize it's still in the collective consciousness.
Oh yes.
Everybody remembered it. Everybody was there.
It's all over this. I mean, even if they didn't want it to be, the one Dr. Serizawa, played by Akihiko Hirata, who was in, I think, every Godzilla movie except like 2, all the way up through the 70s. He was one of those that just loved to come back.
Kept him working, kept him employed.
Yeah. And Momoko Koichi, that played Emiko Yamane, she came back for the return of Godzilla in 1984. Unfortunately, Takashi Shimura was gone by then.
Right.
As we know him from Ikiru
Ikuto.
and The Seven Samurai,
Almost playing the same role.
and
It's like he still has that sad face.
you know, I'll tell you what. There's one Kurosawa picture called Scandal that he plays this spineless lawyer that is the antithesis to every character I have ever seen him play.
Wow.
And it's kind of weird. It's really weird to see. But Dr. Shirazawa lost his eye in the war.
Yeah.
And like you can see, like he wears an eye patch and it's scarred down the side. He's the one that ends up being the quote unquote hero of the whole thing.
Because he's the one that comes up
so
with the
that it cannot,
device.
so that his right, it's an oxygen destroyer. It removes the oxygen from the water, and basically kills and then skins, dissolves everything that's around it. He was studying oxygen and accidentally discovered this thing.
Right.
And wasn't going to even release it to the world until he could find a way that it could be used beneficially and could not then be turned into a weapon.
Right.
Because of Godzilla coming, eventually he changes his mind, but he says, I'm going to burn every note I have, and I'm going down with it, and I am going to die because I don't know that I will be able to resist ever making another one if they, offer me a lot of money or if they threaten people or, whatever. So he's like, I'm not going to take that chance. And
sounds very much like
he takes
in the
himself out
idea,
with his
just
own
in the idea of
device.
almost not wanting the world to have this technology.
Right, because he knew that we weren't ready for it. He knew that the world wasn't ready for it.
Well, in not wanting the world to have this technology reminds me of what has happened with the nuclear test ban treaties, and the world not wanting to do studies on nuclear weapons because we don't want this to be built up. We don't want research on this, and that doesn't stop underground testing. But having this technology, knowing what it can do, knowing the devastation that it can cause, because we have to remind the Hawks that nuclear weapons don't just blow up and fizzle out. Their results
their effects
go
are
on
there
for decades.
Yes. And if because wasn't it in the two that were dropped on Japan, it was uranium-239, wasn't it?
Right.
They were uranium. Then after that, when they developed the plutonium bombs, thankfully those have never been used on anybody. But plutonium has a half-life of 12,000 years.
Right.
Uranium is like 15 or 20 years. Like uranium has a much lower half-life than plutonium.
But if you're not in the blast zone, if you're not one of the people that burns up in the nuclear annihilation,
if you're not melted
from it, you are still exposed to that radiation.
You'll die of cancer.
That's what happened to a lot of people. That's what happened to a lot of people in the Nevada desert who were tourists who were visiting Las Vegas while they were doing tests out there, and they would allow people to sit on the ridge and watch the tests.
Right.
And these pink particles are falling around people, and they had no idea.
Oh, isn't this nice?
Isn't this nice? No. Just grab one. It's a souvenir.
It's the incident at the beginning with the fishing boat is actually based on a true story.
Yeah.
There was nuclear testing happening on the Bikini Atoll. And there was a fishing vessel that did not know that was happening, and they were right near it in the path, and they got hit. A few people died of cancer. Yeah. It was, and so that was what the producer of this had seen. He was flying over the Bikini Atoll, coming back to coming back home, and the producer's name is Tomoyuki Tanaka. And I'm sorry, that's a writer. Yeah, no, Tomoyuki Tanaka. And he saw this and he thought about what would happen if like there was a giant creature that kind of came out of that. As a result, then he brought this back to Toho, and Shigeru Kayama started working on it. I think he had something similar to it, so he kind of adapted it.
Until they came up with the idea for Godzilla being a giant lizard, his original concept was a giant octopus, more like a Cthulhu, or like a tentacle monster. But when they started developing the suit, which, by the way, was developed and painted with a coat of concrete because they didn't have any latex. Latex was in short supply. And this is the first movie. This is the first movie. A
terrible amount of them actually sewed the person into it so that there was no zipper line.
And this is one of the first movies to use a guy in a suit rather than a small model, moved around, stop motion, what have you. Or stop motion as they did in King Kong. Right. And so they sewed the guy into the suit.
Now, there is another name. We have Ishiro Honda, Tomoyuki Tanaka. We have then the special effects master, Eiji Tsuburaya.
Yeah.
He ended up making his own production company that birthed Ultraman, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really? I love Ultraman.
Yes. And when he died in 1970, his protege took over for him. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's a little bit of difference, but you can see like an evolution in the miniature work. But Eiji Tsuburaya and the last name was Akira Ifukube, the composer. They are known as the fathers of Godzilla.
Wow.
Yeah. And Akira Ifukube did the music for every Godzilla movie through Destroya. Like all the way up through into the 90s.
I love Destroya.
Except like maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 of them. Mm-hmm. He also wrote the music for about half of the Zatoichi movies, of which there are 25.
Mm-hmm.
He did.
That's the Blind Swordsman.
He did all of the other monster movies that Honda did, except Mothra. He said he couldn't come up with a song that would be adequate for Mothra, so he declined to do the movie. But yeah, his theme for Godzilla is still used today.
Yeah.
And the music of this is incredible. But anyway, the effects that you were talking about.
Effect.
They put the guy in the suit, and instead of trying to do composite shooting, which would be much more expensive, they decided to take a second unit, and Tsuburaya basically was the second unit director of all of the special effects. So he made all of these miniatures, and he made perfect scale duplicates of these cities that were being destroyed.
Right.
Perfect model scale duplicates, down to tiny itty bitty details that nobody was going to see.
And most of it's in black and white anyway, so a lot of it's in the dark. A lot of those details.
Actually, only 2 of them are. This one is in black and white, and the sequel is, but the rest of them are in color.
No, I'm just talking about this one.
But this one, he gets to use the black and white to his advantage, because a lot of the times you don't really get to see that the tanks aren't quite real, or that the jeeps aren't quite real. This is the miniature work is why when you see the Mystery Science Theater 3000 doing any of these Japanese kaiju movies, that they'll go toy boat, toy boat, toy boat. That's why they do that, because they are miniatures. They're toy boats.
But let's talk about Godzilla for a second, because in this movie, He's not in this movie for a long time.
No,
He
he only
comes
shows
in.
up
He
full
comes in
body
and he
like
kind of
3 times.
disappears. Yeah, he comes
Hmm.
in and then he kind of disappears.
You see him
Because a
come
lot
over
of
that
it,
ridge,
yeah,
and then that was it
that's
until
it
the end.
until the end. And the special effects guy is the one that decided to give him his atomic breath, which in
Hmm.
this movie is not really. It's not the laser beam that it would be later. This one, it's kind of a fine mist. It's
They call it a heat ray, like a
yeah.
heat beam in the novelization. It's a heat beam, uh,
But
and
when
they
you're
they
watching
refer
it in
to it a
this
lot.
movie, but when you're watching it in this movie, it's kind of like a hint of
It's like,
Febreze.
honestly, it kind of just looks like he has really bad halitosis,
Yeah.
like, and he's just melting power lines. Um,
Although the melting power lines look pretty convincing.
that was really cool.
Yeah.
The way that they did these miniatures and the way that it interacts with um, Godzilla, the person in the suit, which actually was this. There were two people that were primary people that were always the ones in it all the way up through 75.
There's some shots,
Which
if
is
you
really
look
cool.
up some behind the scenes stuff, there's some shots of the guys in the suit, and you realize how big and bulky this suit was. And because
It
you can
was
see this
not.
guy sticking out of it, and the guy is so tiny, and the suit is
Yeah,
huge. And
yeah.
like I said, it was coated in this concrete because they didn't have
Hmm.
latex. But since the movie was shot in black and white, you really didn't need a lot of those textures, and he's also mostly in the dark
Hmm.
for probably good reason. I'm actually really
Hmm.
glad this movie's in black and white because I think it works better in black and white.
It
And
does. It does work better.
with all the model work and the suit and all of that, it works better in black and white. And to be honest with you,
It does.
I'm actually more interested in this movie away from Godzilla
There's more
because
going on here than than him.
that shocked me when I saw this the first time because I was like, okay, this is very much about what are we really talking about here? And what are we really dealing with? And it's not just a bunch of military guys sitting around in boardrooms. This is the effect on ordinary people and their relationships and
And
the devastation
scientists.
and scientists and the devastation
Yeah.
and the realization
Hmm.
of what tragedies do to personal lives and to personal
Hmm.
relations, families, and things like that. All of that's in this movie. And you're sitting there watching it, you're going, this is a Godzilla movie. And this is really
Right. Yeah.
insightful. It's a human
Right.
drama more than anything else.
Yes, it is.
And
It's
I don't
it's
think
it's
any other
very it's
Godzilla
very
movie would ever be
impressive.
that.
No,
I
not
know
really.
that the Godzilla movie in 2014, the one with Bryan Cranston, tries to touch a little bit on that, but you can also see the writer and the director trying to get a little humanity out of it, but then the studio wanting their special
See,
effects
yeah,
picture.
therein lied the problem because the writer director was Gareth Edwards, and if anybody was going to be able to pull off an English language Godzilla, it was going to be
Right,
him.
right.
And visually and a lot of narratively, it works. Unfortunately, uh, because they tried to shoehorn too much action into it, the some of the quieter moments get kind of boring as a result.
Yeah.
And it's not Edward's fault.
Mhm.
It's very much studio intervention.
We don't get the
But
characters. We don't get the buildup of the characters. We get a little bit. Everybody gets a little screen time, some dialogue, and then they get their personal relations, and the rest of it is monsters.
right.
And so
And
this movie is not like that. This movie spends the first half hour building these characters, this relationship, this romance that's going on.
mhm, yeah.
And the feeling of the scientist of what are we doing? Because we just got out of the worst human tragedy in our collective memory, and now we're having to deal with this. We've survived Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and here we are dealing with this. What are we really dealing with? What have we created? Right. That's what's underneath. What have we done?
Exactly.
To ourselves.
It's the idea. I mean, if you think about it, Godzilla itself is a walking nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Unpredictable. There's no rhyme or reason to its destruction. It's indiscriminate. Doesn't care, man, woman, child. $10 shack, $1 billion building. He doesn't care.
There's a scene where he's picking up a train full of people, and I'm actually concerned about the people in the train.
In the miniature train, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's the effect this movie has.
Yeah, and he's biting it, and you're like, oh no. Like, this is a very emotionally involving picture.
And it's
in
Godzilla.
Ways that you just, like when years ago, I was pushing for us to do this, and you're like, I don't know, is there enough to talk about? And I'm like, dude, come on, man, watch it. And it took you years to get to it. You finally did, and you're like, yeah, we got to talk about this. I'm like, yeah, I know we did.
Yeah.
It is. The amazing part of it is that this creature that was meant to symbolize the greatest tragedy that ever happened to this nation wound up being the symbol of the nation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of and I don't want this to come off like a John Lennon more popular than Jesus thing, but it's kind of like I had something and then I went and made a joke about it. Now I lost what I was going to say.
And I hate to be like this, but I hate to be like this, but I believe in territoriality when it comes to movies, which is why one of the many reasons that I hated the Roland Emmerich movie was because it took place in New York. New York is not Godzilla's domain. When you have Godzilla attacking America, it's like, okay, there isn't enough of Tokyo.
Now there have been times in that Showa series, and definitely in the Heisei and the Millennium era, specifically, is more of a global kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But there is more attacking. They wanted to have Mothra attack New York in the 1961 movie, but
I love that movie.
They wouldn't let them, and so they kind of invented a country that was a cross between the U.S. and Russia, and then they had Mothra destroy New Kirk City.
New Kirk City. New Moscow.
Yeah. So it was very, but yeah, they. It just doesn't quite.
It doesn't flow right.
Work. Right. It.
It's kind of like that Ghostbusters movie where they went to Oklahoma. I'm like, this is not your territory. You guys belong in New York.
Was that one of the new ones? I haven't seen any of the new ones.
It's like you have a territory. We expect you to be in your territory, defending your home base. And when you see Godzilla anywhere but Japan, it's a little odd. Now, I understand there are some stories that you could have a story in which he has to face Kong, or he has to face Mechagodzilla, or something like that, or Destroya, and he has to go somewhere. But just to set it like in New York or somewhere else, like, it doesn't fit. I'm a purist when it comes to these things. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's true though, because you see. That's what I was gonna say. He's become a symbol for Japan, ironically, in a way that the cross became the symbol for Jesus in Christianity.
Right. Exactly.
The point of suffering is now their point of pride.
Right.
That's
national symbol.
Right. But the to have them in other places kind of works, but for the most part, when you're watching a lot of these, even into the Gamera series, which was from Daiei, it was a completely different studio. They only tell you about the other places that are being attacked. They show you the Japanese places, but tell you that other places are being attacked.
Yeah.
So I kind of enjoyed that. There was this concept that, yes, this is worldwide devastation. They just don't feel like showing it to us.
Right. Right.
And I'm okay with that. I don't need to see every landmark destroyed. I don't need to see Godzilla and Kong fighting and destroying the pyramids, which was in the New Empire,
Transformers,
the most recent one. No, that was in Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire.
I think I saw that one.
That was in the most recent.
I get it mixed up.
That was the one that just came out like this year.
Okay, that one I didn't see.
Yeah. That's the only one of the new ones that I've actually seen in the theater. Mm-hmm. That's not a point of pride, but it was a movie, but but the way that they then kind of changed this symbol of fear and destruction into their savior, basically, in a lot of levels, and it's fascinating to see his evolution through those Showa era movies, which I think sometime we should maybe take a look at that. Those Showa era films. I think one episode for all of them would work, because there's one plot to talk about, and the rest.
I know there's eras. I know there's three distinct eras of Godzilla movies. And I know there's more than 40 Godzilla movies now.
There's 35.
There's 35. Okay, that was close.
There are 35. Yep,
35. And I
only know that off the top of my head because I just counted them to know. Because there's only 12 Gamera movies and there's 35 of yeah. They used to be on television.
I used to watch these when I was a kid on the UHF station. Unfortunately, the ones that I watched were the really crappy ones, the ones that were from the late 60s.
See, that's exactly the problem. The ones that everybody's so familiar with are the ones that were in heavy rotation on the the Sunday afternoon movie or whatever, and all of those were the ones that were like versus Hedorah and Megalon and Gigan and the two Mechagodzilla ones. You didn't really get to see versus King Ghidorah, or all monster, or destroy all monsters,
or this,
or even Godzilla Raids Again. I don't even think Godzilla Raids Again was available in its Japanese version until it got released on the Criterion box set. And the Japanese version of the King Kong versus Godzilla was on like the last supplement disc. Like they were gonna not even put it in, but they were like, let's put it in special features. Sometimes the Japanese versions are hard to find.
The ones we remember are like my favorite, the one with the victory dance. That's what we remember.
That's called Invasion of Astro Monster.
And that's such a fun movie.
It is. A lot of the ones from the 60s, all up until All Monsters Attack, which is a candidate. I think one of my November picks might end up being a twofer, a terrible Godzilla clip show movie and a terrible Gamera clip show movie.
So I want to ask you a question, and this just, I want your theory on this. Why do we love this stuff? Why do we have this thing with giant monsters bashing into each other? The only thing I can figure is it's the same reason we love killer robots. It's the same reason we love war movies. I don't know, why do we love watching? We love watching them stomp on cities and beat the crap out of each other.
I think in a lot of ways it's kind of getting to see something that you just would not expect to see in our day-to-day.
Escapism.
And the same thing goes for, any action movie that has like a big set piece and, it's on like the LA freeway or something. You've never seen that. That has never happened in life.
Right.
It's not even conceivable to happen in life because most of it is defies physics. And I'm not talking about the Matrix one. I'm just talking about any random. Unless you're doing an OJ movie. But I think there's a lot of factors that go into it because a lot of times it's a test of humanity and to see if people can come together against a common enemy. And unfortunately, what we find out in most of these kaiju films is that no, we cannot come together during a tragedy. We are going to be contentious little bastards all the way through everything and be afraid that we're going to be seen in some way or another. And it happens in all of them. The people in charge always want to cover something up. They never want to deal with the situation itself until it is about to kill them. And then it's too late.
We're in the middle of... Sorry.
I was going to say, a lot of these actually function as commentaries on Japanese politics and military intervention and bureaucracy slowing down things that actually need to be done and things like that. Like they're actually satires of contemporary Japanese society wrapped up in this little monster movie.
In terms of this, are the social, societal fallout from it.
Yeah.
And how it impacts, and a lot of monster movies try to do this and fail. Almost every monster movie tries to do this and fails. It doesn't really show us how the society is impacted. It shows us how the military reacts to it. It shows us, we see the Avengers tearing up New York.
Yep.
But you don't see the immediate reaction to it. You hear about it, but you don't see it. And you see, the sort of Battle of New York where they're tearing up skyscrapers and everything. I'm thinking people are being killed one by one. You never see that
on a ridiculous level.
Right. People just went to work.
Yeah.
And that's what's in the back of your mind.
It's kind of impressive that these are still very popular now. Especially in the U.S. post 9/11.
Yeah. Well, for a while it wasn't, because in the years just following 9/11, right before it, we had Independence Day and we had Armageddon, we had all these movies, and 9/11 kind of, for a long time, killed our appetite for wholesale destruction.
The first monster movie in the U.S. that I remember post 9/11 was Cloverfield.
Yeah. Yeah, but that
That
was
actually destroyed a
2007.
major
Was it
a major
2007?
American metropolis. It was
So it was
Cloverfield.
significant. It was not a
And
massive, significant amount of time, but it was enough time to
so
so that it doesn't
right,
sting as much. And the problem I had
right.
with a movie like Cloverfield is it was interesting, but when it was over, there really wasn't anything to it. It was like it's good while you're watching it, but when it's over, there's nothing to think about, nothing to talk about. It's just kind of done with.
Yeah,
And
and I'll tell you what, the biggest drawback from that movie is not the found footage, but it's constantly having to hear T.J. Miller talk. Uh,
thank you. Thank you.
I
I'm,
just,
I'm, glad, I'm glad. I'm
I,
glad one of us said it. Uh,
mm-mm. He is just, I can't, I, the first two Deadpool movies are a little difficult to watch in some parts for me because he's there. Like, I just
well,
don't want anything to do with
J.J.
it.
Abrams made those movies, and then came up with two sequels that I'm still waiting to find a point to any of that. Because the
Well,
second one,
the,
the 10, was it 10 Cloverfield Lane? The one with John, the one I
yes.
always say that movie would have been so much better and would have been so much easier to sit through if John Goodman would just calm down.
Right. I actually saw that in the theaters. The funny part of that
I did
is,
too.
initially, it was not supposed to be part of the Cloverfield thing. It was just this like really well produced, tightly constructed kind of thriller that
Yeah,
they were able to kind of manipulate and put into the universe so that they could have a very different style in the franchise. I like the idea that each one is a very different kind of movie, that it's more of an anthology series. That one that they did on Netflix that was weird, that
the one that
dealt
dropped all of a
with,
sudden.
that was such an odd, yeah, that also was not supposed to be a Cloverfield movie.
Yeah,
They tacked that on into it during I think post and stuff like that. But
I've said
um,
it before and I'll say it again. The 10 Cloverfield Lane, the second one, they did that story so much better on Rick and Morty. I mean,
yeah,
when Morty had his monster child and he wouldn't let him go outside,
mm-hmm.
they told that story so much better in 5 minutes. You know, but Dad, I want to
Yeah,
destroy mankind.
well, yeah, well,
Here's a movie that runs an hour and 40 minutes, and some animators and some writers managed to perfect this idea in a matter of seconds. You know,
mm,
really. Anyway,
yeah.
Godzilla.
It's you know this is I mean, and you talk about an hour and 40 minutes. This is only an hour and 36 minutes,
Yeah.
and the depth that they get, especially with a lot of the characters, I really like the dynamic between Emiko, Yamane, who
Emiko is
like I
kind of
said, she. Uh,
Emiko is kind of the star of the
but
show.
yeah, she is. Yeah, she is. She's the most persistent character throughout.
Hmm.
Um, and you've got her cute boyfriend Hideo Ogata,
They're
who
such a cute couple. Oh my god,
they are.
they're adorable.
He works for the shipping company that the first boat that ran into Godzilla
Yeah.
that sank was from. The shipping company that worked with. That's how that got kind of. That's how he got kind of roped into all of this, um, and and she's the daughter of zoologist Dr. Kyohei Yamane, played by the great Takashi Shimura,
Right.
um, whose pupil was Dr. Daisuke Sarazawa, who is Emiko's fiance, sorta.
Hmm. Love interest.
Not really love interest. They're engaged, but she's in love with Ogata. They're together, but she's kind of betrothed to Shirazawa, and they don't ever get to talk to him about it. But at the end, when he's dying, he says, you two will be great together, like be happy together, and
kind of ties that up. And by the way, Godzilla dies.
Godzilla does die. Godzilla is destroyed by the oxygen destroyer.
Excuse me, I take that back. He does not die, he is destroyed.
He is destroyed. That is one of the hardest sequences to watch in any of these. That death of Godzilla and the death of Godzilla at the end of Destroya, that is heartbreaking. I never thought that I would be that involved when I was watching him melt down. That was something else. But here, you watch him basically dissolve, and it is so just brutal and gruesome. And I love that Dr. Yamane was like, if we keep testing nuclear weapons, if we keep developing this stuff, this wasn't the last one.
Right.
I'm sure that this was just one of many that if we keep messing around, we're going to wake them up.
Right.
And lo and behold, the next year they did.
Yeah, and you ever think this sometimes with these movies, where you got the monster who's been defeated and is dead in the middle of the street, and everybody's looking at them with their hands on their hips, and they're all looking at them solemnly, and it's over, and they're wiping their foreheads, and everybody's like glad it's over, and you're thinking in the back of your mind, someone has to clean this up.
It's kind of the only kaiju movie that ever actually directly deals with that was Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
Do you remember they go to the scene and they're trying to jack into the brain, and they're trying to save keep the body away from scavengers because there's been a whole big black market for kaiju innards and stuff.
Ron Perlman.
That's the only one. Leave it to Guillermo del Toro to actually address cleaning up a monster.
Yeah, because that's what I thought at the end of Kong. It's like, okay, you've got your catchphrase at the end of the movie, but I'm thinking somebody has to clean that up because that's a 50-foot ape.
Somebody, who is going to drag that?
Right.
I mean, in 1933, they had cranes and stuff. I mean, they were able to build skyscrapers, but that is not going to be an easy haul.
Well, look, the Egyptians could move stone blocks. I mean, I'm sure they can get Kong out of the street. But this is, by the way, big monster movie. Excuse me. Rewind. This is, by the way, our monster movie month for Halloween. We're doing monsters of all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
And that put me in mind of that. It's like you've killed the monster, but you got to get rid of it because at some point this monster's going to start to stink.
It's going to turn. Yeah.
It's going to turn on you.
And if you think about it, I mean, at least King Kong ends in the winter. Mm-hmm.
So you got a little time.
The Godzilla Godzilla movies always take place in the summer. They always take place in the summer because that's easier to shoot. And as they went along, even though they were phenomenally popular and made a whole lot of money, they kept slashing the budget as the years went on. So they kept having to reuse the suit. If you look in some of them, you can actually see the suit falling apart on screen. Yeah. Like,
you probably see the zippers too.
You can.
Well, and let's talk for a second about the sound effect, because the sound effect is so brilliant. I didn't realize until doing research for this movie exactly how that was achieved. They ran a rubber glove. Ran a rubber glove down a stand-up bass, and they ran it backwards. That's the famous Godzilla scream.
And he also created the stomp with a timpani.
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
specific kind of head on a timpani. But that was it was rubbing
It
a
sounds like they're running on. It
contrabass.
sounds like they're running
It was a
on plywood.
contrabass with a resin coated leather glove,
Mm-hmm.
and it reverberated, and that was the sound that was produced.
And
And he beat a kettle drum with a thick knotted rope to get his walk. And that was the composer. That wasn't even a sound effects editor. That was the composer of the music.
the guys who made Monsters Inc. wanted to use the Godzilla sound effect, and they asked Toho. Toho
Toho said no.
Toho is very, very tight-fisted with their rights, so they wouldn't allow them to do that.
Yeah.
A few years before this, in one of the Treehouse of Horror episodes of The Simpsons, they were allowed. They used the Godzilla scream, and one of the Pixar guys asked one of the Simpsons guys, was like, "Well, how did they let you use it? How did they let you use it and they didn't let us use it?" And they said, "Well, you asked." You asked. We just used it, you know.
That feels like such a Simpsons answer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That is just a Simpsons answer. You went you went about it the right way. That was your problem.
You went through channels. You asked.
Right. Yeah.
But it is such an iconic.
The only time that
effect.
worked was the only time that worked was Seth MacFarlane for the Star Wars.
Yeah.
The only time that ever worked.
Yeah. But that's pretty much all I got. What about you?
Yeah. The only other thing I have is Happy 70, Gojira. This is its 70th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you've never seen it and you've seen other Godzilla movies, this is not what you expect.
It's not what you expect. What I would say is the closest I would say the closest equivalent to this in a modern day is Godzilla -1,
which I haven't seen yet.
Oh God, it's on Netflix. It is phenomenal. I bought it and I got the minus color too, so I got to watch it black and white. That was awesome too. That was a heck of a picture, and I think that we would definitely benefit from talking about that one too.
Well, I want to say we're in the middle of our Halloween Shocktober, and this year we've elicited a theme that just kind of fell into place. We're dealing with monsters great and small, and of all shapes and sizes. Last week we talked about The Silence of the Lambs. This week we talked about Godzilla. And next week we have another anniversary.
Yeah.
Because this year is the 50th anniversary of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we've avoided it.
Yeah, it is.
But we got to talk about it.
Well, look, and we do need to talk about it because it is a very important film, and it is an excellent film. It's just one of those that I watched it once and I said, well, I never have to do that again.
But you know what? It's a little like, and I was going to mention this when we're talking about Godzilla. In some of the best thrillers, whether monster movies or whatever, even Silence of the Lambs had this. When you get to the end and you can feel the pressure valve releasing, it's finally over. That's what Silence of the Lambs feels like. That, to me, is what this Godzilla feels like. And that's what Texas Chainsaw Massacre feels like. You get to that decompression at the end when it's finally over, when the nightmare is finally over. And
it's kind of it's that second that Kong hits the street, that like everything just kind of
it's done. It's over.
Oh, it's over.
Yeah. Well, then when Godzilla's
I
dead.
mean, not for Tim because he's got to drag the body off, but
Right, right. Not for the boys you got to call in to get rid of him. But
yeah.
yes, next week we're talking about the Texas Chainsaw
I just
Massacre.
kind of picture the guy that swept up. I just kind of think the guy that swept up at the end of a Mr. Peabody's movie is going to have to be in charge of
Just
that, and he's just going to stand there. He's not going to know what to do.
that angry little guy. He's standing there. He's standing there. He's scratching his head. Yeah.
I can see it, and it's just the funniest image in my mind. Yeah, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre next time. I'm not looking forward to seeing it again. I I appreciate it without enjoying it. It's just it's just gross.
It is hard to
and
enjoy.
it's not the gore or anything. It's just I remember
It's like
when they're
sitting in a room with
eating
rotting
at the
meat.
table. Now, see, yes, and when they're at the table and they're eating, and I think they have, I think it's pork, and I have had trouble eating pork ever since I saw this movie because I know
I thought it would
now
have been
that
barbecue.
it looks like human flesh.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff really messed with me. But then we're going to follow that with a different. You know me, and I love my horror comedies. What We Do in the Shadows, Shaun of the Dead.
Which we talked
you know,
about,
all
both of
that
which we
kind of
talked
stuff
about.
that I always do. So now we're finally doing. I finally did Shaft in February a couple years ago. But now I'm finally doing Blackula, and to a lesser extent, Scream, Blackula, Scream. But that one's harder to get a hold of, so I don't expect you to be able to find that to see it. But we're gonna do Blackula from what was that, 74?
74.
Oh, so that's also an anniversary. Look at that.
Yes.
And we are
74 was a
and
hell of a year.
that was a weird year. And then we're
That
gonna
was the
wrap it
double
up
whammy
with
for Mel Brooks, too.
yes.
And we're
gonna
gonna
wrap it up
have-
with.
We're going
We're
to
going
end
to talk about
our
the.
we're going to end our Shocktober with the eighth wonder of the world, the one and only King
Yes. I'm very happy we're doing this. I love this movie.
Kong. I absolutely love King
Love
Kong.
King
How
Kong.
can you not love King
Love.
Kong?
I
If you
don't
start to
know.
if you sit down and enjoy it, you'll love it. If you try to find a logic in it, it'll fall apart in the first 30 seconds. I loved the greatest
see,
one of the greatest comments ever made about King Kong was from Roger Ebert in his great movie column. He said, "Let me tell you something. Anybody that puts a 50-foot ape on a stage in front of an audience full of people deserves whatever he gets."
pretty much, yeah. Yep. Can't really dispute that.
You dunderhead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my absolute favorite line from that movie is when they're walking through the jungle and they see a Stegosaurus, and he literally turns to his party and he says, "It must be from the dinosaur family."
Well, yeah. Oh, you know what? Bringing that up actually I do want to bring up how the math just doesn't math for Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yamada is saying, this trilobite was with it, and he's a 2 million-year-old monster, and I'm like, okay, so first of all, I needed to look up when trilobites happened. Trilobites were eradicated in the Great Extinction that crossed from the Panatoic, whatever, back when Pangea was around, that era. There was a mass extinction of like 90% of life on the planet. Yeah. And then the Mesozoic era started. That's where the Jurassic and the Triassic and the Cretaceous, where all the dinosaurs were. That got eradicated 65 million years ago. So the trilobite was actually destroyed 200 or 300 million years before the dinosaurs were eradicated, which is when Gojira would have been somewhere in there. It just doesn't line up.
But they do go to the trouble to try to explain where he came from.
They do, and I appreciate the fact that they use million and not thousand.
Yeah.
Because something as stupid like the she creature, they're trying to say that this woman is regressing into a past life, and that she was like this early version of a sea creature that was getting legs that was coming out of the ocean, and this happened 300 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, during the 1700s? Really? Really? This was happening during the Enlightenment? Really?
Well, it's like...
anyway.
Well, it's like the Carl Sagan show Cosmos, edited for rednecks. We know that the Earth was created by God. We know now that the Earth is hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Yeah. So I appreciate that they went with million, and I understand that at that point, trying to go, say, 500 million years ago, and 65 and 350 million years ago was just way too much for people.
Yeah.
The concept of that is just phenomenal anyway.
But when it comes
and
to
if you think about
movies,
it, that's not even a third of the time on Earth, of the span of the Earth's existence, is that 500 million years of actual life. Oof.
You learn very quickly not to apply logic to monster movies, because when you do that,
you can't.
It just starts muddying the water, and you just don't want that.
Well, then you're like, this is stupid. It's like, yeah, it is stupid. That's the point. It's fun.
That's the point.
It's and now the first ones of all of these, every time that there's a first, there's an original one. They're always the villain, and they're always destroying, and they're always bad. But eventually, they wind up being very fun.
Right.
This is not a fun movie. This is to most people who have only seen Rocky 3 and 4, and then they try to go back and watch the first one, and they realize how ridiculous 3 and 4 were, and they realize how subtle and beautiful and what a human drama it is, and they're like, okay, this is not what I expected. This is what I signed on for. Like a lot of people today would watch this, and they would probably be like Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. It would be like, there is supposed to be dinosaurs on this. Like there's supposed to be a monster in this movie.
Tour, right?
There is supposed to be a monster in this movie, right? But they build more tension by not showing it, and that's always one of the key things in these monster movies. That it works here. It worked in Jaws. It worked time and time again. The less you see, the scarier it is.
But I'm sure we got
until
more
you see
a
50-foot tall thing crushing everything and spraying his halitosis and melting buildings and things. Like people would say, oh, this is a horror movie. It's like, really? Picture that.
Atomic halitosis elsewhere. Here, like I said, it's a fine Febreze mist.
Right. But you know what I mean? Like that melts everything that it comes in contact with.
Yeah.
I challenge you not to. I was watching one of the Gamera movies recently, and somebody, it was all starting, and they were like, we have to evacuate, and my thought was, already one step ahead of you, sir. Oh, you mean the city?
Sorry.
Yes, I think there's a lot more in the kaiju genre that we can talk about that will not live up to this, but are still pretty good.
Yeah, because they don't have
this
the rest of them are just stomping and destroying things.
Basically, the two best kaiju movies are King Kong and the original Godzilla.
Which is what we're talking about
King
this
Kong,
month.
the original Godzilla. Yep. So we're getting in the two best.
Okay, so
right
this month I want to tell you we are. If you missed last week's, I'm going to kind of reiterate this. We're in the middle of rebuilding and restructuring our little podcast here because we were gone for a little while because life. And our Twitter feed is now gone. Our website is gone. And I'm in the process of rebuilding all of that. So if you want to contact us, I've put our email address down here in the show notes down at the bottom. And
or as you can just comment.
Or you just please comment, like. We need likes and subscribers.
Please like, hit, subscribe. Share, tell your friends, subscribe, all of that.
We're trying to get back on schedule.
Yeah,
I'm here to put you back on schedule.
So that my men are working as fast as possible. I need more men. Anyway, I just got to see that in the theater, actually. Yeah, we thank you so very much for listening and for bearing this hyper-focus ODHD mind. Let me spout off some things that I learned about monster movies in the last year and a half.
And what little knowledge I had.
So we thank you very much for listening, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Stomp, stomp, stomp. Let's do the Halloween. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Halloween. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Halloween. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Let's do the Halloween stomp. Do the flying Superman.